Hello and welcome to Nightmare Lullabies. As you settle in for the night, prepare to be immersed in a world of eerie whispers and unsettling tales, designed to both chill and soothe. Now, close your eyes, relax, and let the darkness carry you away. And if these nightly tales captivate you, feel free to join our community for more whispered secrets. In the waning hours of a cold February evening, when the moon hung low like a sorrowful sentinel, Isabella sat by the window of her solitary mansion. The room was dimly lit by the flickering flame of a single candle. Outside, a gentle drizzle created soft, rhythmic taps on the windowpane, each drop echoing like a whisper from a distant past. Isabella's heart, long accustomed to solitude, fluttered with a mix of melancholy and longing. She had spent many a lonely night pondering the mysteries of love and loss. That night, however, an unexpected delivery arrived at her door. A single crimson rose, perfectly preserved and bathed in an eerie, otherworldly glow. Its petals were deep red, almost as if they held the last remnants of a dying sunset, and its scent was both intoxicating and sorrowful. As she cradled the delicate bloom in her hands, a shiver ran down her spine. There was something unsettling about it, a sense of foreboding that belied its beauty. The rose seemed to pulse with life, each heartbeat of its existence synchronized with her own. In that quiet moment, Isabella could not shake the feeling that the rose was not a simple gift, but rather a harbinger of fate, a cursed token meant to awaken dormant memories of love and despair. In the days that followed, Isabella found herself haunted by strange occurrences. Each night, as the clock struck midnight, she would hear soft whispers echoing through the corridors of her mansion. The voice was tender yet laden with sorrow, as if it carried centuries of lost passion and regret. It spoke of a love that was forbidden, a romance doomed by a curse that spanned lifetimes. One particularly chilly night, unable to ignore the persistent murmurs any longer, Isabella followed the sound. The whispers seemed to lead her to a hidden part of the mansion she had never explored, a neglected wing, draped in cobwebs and memories of a forgotten era. There, behind a heavy oak door, lay a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Clutching the crimson rose tightly, she descended slowly, each step accompanied the echo of her own heartbeat. At the bottom of the stairs, she entered a vast, crumbling hall, its walls adorned with faded portraits and long-lost relics. In the center of the room, illuminated by a solitary shaft of moonlight, stood a grand mirror. Its surface was clouded by dust and time, yet within its depths, Isabella saw more than just her own reflection. There, behind her, appeared the faint outline of a man, a spectral figure with sorrowful eyes and a presence that both chilled and beckoned her. His lips moved silently, as if struggling to articulate words that had long been imprisoned by the curse of time. The ghostly figure slowly turned, and in a voice as soft as a distant sigh, he began his tale. "I am Gabriel, a soul condemned by love and bound by a curse as ancient as the night itself. Centuries ago, I loved a maiden of unparalleled beauty, but our love was forbidden by fate and mortal constraints. In our final embrace, as the crimson rose bloomed at the moment of our union, our souls were intertwined in a bond that doomed us to eternal sorrow. That rose, the symbol of our passion, now carries the weight of my despair." Isabella listened, enraptured by the spectral narrative. As Gabriel recounted his tragic past, the room seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the two of them suspended in a timeless limbo. His story was a tapestry of passion and pain, a reminder that love, when intertwined with destiny's cruel hand, could lead to a fate worse than death. He spoke of secret meetings in hidden gardens where roses bloomed out of season, of whispered promises made under the watchful eyes of the night, and of a curse that turned the sweetest kiss into a lingering taste of sorrow. Each word was a delicate caress, both soothing and harrowing, as if the very act of speaking allowed his tormented soul to momentarily taste freedom from the curse. Moved by the ghost's confession, Isabella felt an inexplicable connection with this tragic figure from another time. Despite the chill that ran down her spine, she reached out, almost instinctively, toward the spectral presence. The crimson rose in her hand seemed to glow ever brighter, as if resonating with the intensity of their shared sorrow. In that moment, time itself appeared to slow. The boundaries between the living and the dead blurred. Isabella's heartbeat merged with the rhythm of the unseen world, and she felt as if she were standing on the edge of an abyss, a precipice where love and despair intertwined. Gabriel's voice, now a tender murmur, whispered, "Our souls are bound by the rose, a symbol of our eternal love and endless despair. But know this, dear Isabella, even as I am cursed to wander these halls of sorrow, your touch, your belief in the purity of love, can break the chains of this fate. Embrace the rose, and in doing so, you may yet find the strength to rewrite our destiny." Torn between fear and a deep, yearning hope, Isabella closed her eyes. In her mind, she pictured the crimson rose transforming from a harbinger of doom into a beacon of possibility, a vessel through which love could transcend the shackles of time and darkness. With trembling resolve, she pressed the rose gently against her heart, allowing its warmth to seep into her very soul. A sudden gust of wind swept through the hall, and the spectral figure of Gabriel began to fade like morning mist under the rising sun. Yet, even as he vanished, his final words lingered in the air. True love, though born of despair, holds the power to defy even the darkest of curses. In the silent aftermath, the oppressive gloom of the mansion began to yield to a subtle change. The cold stillness gave way to a warm glow, as if the space itself was being bathed in the promise of redemption. Isabella felt a spark of hope ignite within her, a gentle light piercing the veil of despair. Slowly, she made her way back to her room, still holding the crimson rose, now radiating a tender warmth. As she sat and reflected on the night's extraordinary events, she began to understand that Gabriel's tragic love was not merely a relic of sorrow. It was a chance to break the cycle of pain and to embrace a future where love might conquer even the deepest darkness. The night gradually yielded to the early light of dawn, and with each passing moment, the curse that had bound the rose seemed to weaken. The once deep, foreboding red of the flower softened to a gentler, warmer hue, a sign that death and despair were yielding to life and hope. In the days and weeks that followed, a new energy spread throughout the old mansion. The legend of the crimson rose of despair began to change. Where once only sorrow and fear reigned, whispers now spoke of a mysterious power that allowed hearts to heal and destinies to change. Isabella, with the strength of a spirit reborn, shared her experience, not as a mere warning, but as a testament to the resilience of the human heart and the transformative power of love. Visitors who came to the mansion felt an inexplicable calm, as though the walls themselves had released the pain of the past and made room for new hope. The crimson rose was carefully preserved in a glass case. No longer did it stand as a symbol of cursed passion and endless despair. It had become a beacon of redemption, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always the possibility for healing and renewal. As the first light of dawn broke through the shadows, the memory of Gabriel and his timeless sorrow lingered like a gentle whisper in the air. The night had been one of darkness and despair, but it also had sown the seeds of hope, a promise that even the most broken hearts can find a path to healing. So, dear listener, as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that even in the depths of despair, love holds the power to transform. Let this tale remind you that every whispered secret, every soft-spoken word, can guide you toward a peaceful dawn. In the depths of a long, cold winter night, Evelyn sat alone in the darkened parlor of her ancestral home. The only light came from the soft flicker of a single candle on the mantel, its flame wavering like a heartbeat in the silence. Outside, a gentle snowfall muffled the world, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Evelyn's thoughts were heavy with loneliness and longing. She had inherited the old mansion not only as a shelter but also as a repository of memories, echoes of a past filled with whispered promises and unfulfilled love. That night, as the clock chimed midnight, she first heard it, a delicate murmur almost too soft to discern. It was as though the walls of the house carried secrets too ancient to be forgotten, each creak and sigh resonating with the echoes of a long-lost heart. Intrigued and a bit unnerved, Evelyn rose from her armchair and walked toward the corridor. With each step, the wooden floor creaked softly beneath her feet, and the whispering grew more distinct, a series of gentle echoes that seemed to call her name. The sound led her to a faded portrait hanging in the hallway, its subject a woman of striking beauty with eyes that seemed to glisten even in the dim light. Evelyn paused before the portrait, the whispered echoes now mingling with the sound of her own breathing. The portrait's frame was intricately carved, depicting floral motifs entwined with delicate, Gothic patterns. As she traced her fingers over the cool wood, she felt a sudden shiver, as if the eyes in the painting were watching her intently. In that moment, the quiet murmuring transformed into clear, sorrowful words. They seemed to emanate not from the room, but from within the painting itself. The voice was soft and melancholic, a murmur filled with both tenderness and pain. I remember a time when love was a promise, when every heartbeat echoed the joys and sorrows of a forbidden romance. Evelyn's heart pounded as she listened intently. The voice carried with it the weight of years and the burden of secrets, and it slowly drew her into the story of a love that had been lost, and perhaps never fully let go. The portrait's eyes appeared to shift ever so slightly, and for a fleeting moment, Evelyn could have sworn she saw the image of another, a faint silhouette of a man, his gaze filled with longing and regret. The whispering deepened, growing into a soft lament that seemed to caress her ears, urging her to uncover the mystery that lay hidden within these walls. Compelled by the mysterious murmurs, Evelyn retraced her steps to the mansion's library, a room filled with dust-laden books and memories of a bygone era. As she entered, the air turned noticeably cooler, and the whispers followed her like a persistent breeze. The library's large bay window framed a view of the snow-covered grounds, where the moon cast a silvery glow upon the frost. Evelyn's eyes were drawn to an old diary resting on a mahogany desk. Its leather cover was cracked with age, and the pages within were filled with elegant, flowing script. As she opened the diary, the voice returned, this time clearer and imbued with the raw emotion of regret. I was the keeper of a secret love, a passion that defied time. Our hearts, once intertwined, now lie scattered like fallen leaves in the winds of fate. The diary detailed a love affair between a young man named Alexander and a woman whose name had been lost to history. Their love was as intense as it was doomed, a passionate bond formed in secrecy, destined to be marred by betrayal and sorrow. With every turn of the page, Evelyn could almost feel the presence of Alexander's spirit, as if his very essence was woven into the ink and paper. As she read further, the diary recounted a fateful night, a Valentine's Eve when Alexander had vowed to return to his beloved, only to be thwarted by a cruel twist of fate. The echo of his voice seemed to seep from the walls, each word resonating with the pain of unfulfilled promises and the ghost of a love that lingered long after its time had passed. In the days that followed, Evelyn found herself unable to escape the spectral presence that now seemed permanently entwined with the mansion. The soft echoes of Alexander's lament became a constant companion, his sorrowful whispers echoing through the halls and her very soul. It was as if the mansion itself had become a sanctuary for the lost and the broken-hearted. Late one evening, while the wind howled outside and the shadows danced upon the walls, Evelyn felt a sudden chill. She closed her eyes and listened. The whispering became almost tangible, a tender murmur that caressed her ears. My heart, forever haunted by the echoes of our lost love, beats in the silence of the night. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted. The oppressive loneliness was replaced by a profound sense of shared sorrow. Evelyn could feel the weight of Alexander's regret, as if it were her own. Her heart ached, yet within that pain was a strange comfort, the recognition that she was not alone in her yearning for connection and healing. Evelyn wandered to the mansion's conservatory, a long-forgotten space overgrown with wild ivy and illuminated by the gentle glow of moonlight filtering through broken glass. There, amidst the decay of nature reclaiming its territory, she discovered an old stone bench. Sinking onto it, she allowed herself to be enveloped by the hushed whispers, as if they were a lullaby meant only for her. In the stillness, she began to sense a rhythm, a pulse in the air that resonated with the beat of her own heart. It was as though Alexander's soul was reaching out, seeking solace in the echo of her compassion. The spectral whispers swirled around her, blending seamlessly with the soft, natural sounds of the night. Each murmur, each sigh, painted a picture of love and loss so vivid that the boundaries between past and present blurred. Over time, the persistent echoes began to weave themselves into the fabric of Evelyn's existence. During quiet moments, while reading in the library or staring out at the wintry landscape, she would catch fleeting phrases, a name, a tender promise, or the sound of a distant laugh, that vanished as soon as they were heard. These fragments of Alexander's voice became a constant reminder that his love was still present, lingering like an unfinished melody. One particularly still night, as the snow fell silently outside, Evelyn sat before the grand piano in the music room. Though the instrument had long been silenced, memories of past concerts and whispered serenades filled the room. Gently, she ran her fingers over the dusty keys, and to her astonishment, a single, clear note resonated through the darkness. It was a note of pure longing, echoing the sorrow and beauty of a love lost. At that moment, the whispers converged into a singular, almost tangible presence, a warm yet bittersweet sensation that enveloped her. In that space between sound and silence, Evelyn felt Alexander's ghostly heartbeat align with her own. The echoes of a haunted heart had become a bridge between two souls, a connection forged in the depths of despair, yet fueled by an enduring hope for reconciliation. As the night deepened, the intensity of the echoes increased. They no longer seemed like random, disjointed murmurs, but rather a coherent narrative, a hidden love story yearning to be resolved. Each whisper carried fragments of Alexander's past, a stolen glance in a crowded ballroom, the promise of an eternal bond, and the sorrow of a final farewell never uttered. Evelyn's heart, once heavy with solitude, began to lighten under the weight of these revelations. Though the spectral presence was bittersweet, it offered her an unexpected comfort, a reminder that even in the silence of the night, love could be felt, shared, and perhaps one day healed. In the final hours before dawn, as the first hints of light crept through the heavy curtains, Evelyn made a quiet decision. She would no longer fear the haunting echoes of Alexander's lost love. Instead, she would embrace them as part of her own journey toward healing. Sitting by the piano once more, she whispered softly to the lingering shadows, "Let the echoes guide us. May our haunted hearts find solace in one another." In that intimate moment, the whispering seemed to soften into a gentle hum, as if the mansion itself was acknowledging the fragile beauty of their shared sorrow. The voices grew tender, offering a silent promise that even the deepest wounds could eventually be mended by the enduring power of love. Though the night was long and filled with memories of loss, Evelyn felt a new sense of purpose stirring within her. The haunted echoes were no longer a source of pain, but a testament to the love that had once been, and perhaps might be revived in quiet moments of reflection and hope. As the mansion slowly awoke to the light of a new day, the echoes of a haunted heart lingered like a soft refrain, a reminder that in every sorrow, there is also the promise of healing, and in every whisper, the hope of rediscovering love. On a chill Valentine's night, in the heart of an ancient estate cloaked in secrets, Aurora sat by her window as twilight surrendered to darkness. The soft glow of a single lamp illuminated her study, its light dancing upon old books and forgotten trinkets. Outside, the mist swirled around the estate like memories long past. That evening, a mysterious parcel arrived at her door. Wrapped in faded velvet and sealed with an ornate emblem, it contained a single midnight blue rose. Its petals shimmered with an iridescent sheen as if kissed by moonlight, and its fragrance held both allure and a whisper of melancholy. As Aurora held the rose, a shiver of both wonder and unease ran down her spine. She sensed that this was no ordinary token. It was a message from another time, a harbinger of a passion veiled in mystery. In the days following the arrival of the enigmatic rose, Aurora found herself drawn into a series of uncanny events within the estate. Late at night, as silence reigned over the mansion's halls, she began to hear soft murmurs echoing through the corridors. These voices, filled with tender sorrow and wistful longing, seemed to call her name from the shadows. Unable to resist the pull of the unknown, Aurora ventured into a secluded wing of the mansion, a part long abandoned and hidden from daily life. In a dimly lit corridor lined with portraits of forgotten ancestors, she discovered a heavy oak door that led to a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Clutching the midnight blue rose, she descended step by step, her heart quickening with each echoing footfall. At the bottom, she entered a vast, dust-laden hall. Here, the moonlight streamed through a broken window, casting fragmented beams onto the worn stone floor. In the center of the hall stood an ornate, antique mirror, its surface clouded by time. As Aurora gazed into the mirror, she perceived not just her own reflection but the faint image of a man. A figure whose sorrowful eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The spectral figure materialized slowly until his presence felt as real as the chill in the air. His name was Sebastian, a soul trapped between the realms of the living and the dead. His voice, soft yet laden with centuries of regret, began to tell a story of a love that had defied fate. "I am Sebastian," he murmured, "once bound to a love so fierce it defied time itself. I cherished a woman whose beauty rivaled the dawn, yet our union was cursed by a fate too cruel to accept. On a night much like this, our hearts entwined beneath the silent watch of the stars, and the midnight blue rose marked the moment of our eternal bond and my unending sorrow." Aurora listened in a trance as Sebastian recounted his past. He spoke of secret rendezvous in hidden gardens where blossoms bloomed against nature's will, of whispered promises exchanged in the darkness, and of a tragic destiny that severed their love. Every word he uttered wove a tapestry of passion, pain, and longing, a reminder that some loves are destined to linger in the shadows, beyond the realm of mortal redemption. Moved by Sebastian's confession, Aurora felt an unanticipated connection to the forlorn phantom. Though fear gripped her heart, an undeniable hope began to spark within. She reached out, almost as if drawn by destiny, to the presence before her. In that charged moment, the boundaries between life and death blurred, and she sensed that their fates were intricately linked. Sebastian's eyes, deep pools of sorrow, seemed to search hers as he continued. "Our souls are bound by that rose, a symbol of a passion that knows no end, yet is condemned to wander the realms of regret. Perhaps, dear Aurora, your strength and the purity of your heart might free us from this relentless torment." With a trembling resolve, Aurora pressed the rose close to her chest, feeling its cool petals against her skin. In her heart, she wished for a change, a chance to break the chains of a curse that had haunted Sebastian for centuries. As if in response, a soft, unexpected warmth began to emanate from the flower, stirring something deep within her. For a fleeting moment, the phantom's sorrow lifted as his form seemed to glow with a bittersweet light. Aurora sensed that in embracing this shared pain, a possibility for redemption and renewal was born. The mansion's cold walls, once echoing with despair, now resonated with the promise of a transformative love. In the ensuing nights, the presence of Sebastian grew gentler, a constant companion rather than an apparition of despair. Aurora immersed herself in the history of the estate, unearthing diaries and letters that chronicled a love once fervent and alive. Each discovery deepened her understanding of Sebastian's tragic past and the curse that had condemned him to eternal wandering. Together, though separated by the veil of mortality, Aurora and Sebastian began to weave a narrative of hope from the threads of sorrow. She learned of secret meetings in moonlit groves, of promises made in hushed tones that time had tried to silence, and of a love that transcended the bounds of existence. With every whispered memory and every tender recollection, the curse that had shackled Sebastian's soul appeared to weaken. Aurora's own heart, too, transformed in the process. The once solitary figure who had inherited the estate now found herself embracing a destiny intertwined with another, a destiny that held the promise of breaking free from the chains of past sorrows. As the nights passed, the ghostly presence of Sebastian no longer evoked only sorrow. It inspired a determination to reclaim a love that had once been pure and boundless. One fateful Valentine's night, under a sky awash with starlight, Aurora made a decision that would forever alter their intertwined fates. In the quiet sanctuary of the estate's hidden garden, she knelt before a time-worn fountain where wild roses clung to the ancient stone. There she laid the midnight blue rose, a symbol of both despair and hope, upon the water's surface. In that silent act, Aurora called upon the strength of her heart to break the curse that had haunted Sebastian for so long. As the petals floated upon the water, a gentle radiance enveloped the garden. The spectral figure of Sebastian appeared one final time, his form less sorrowful and more serene, as if buoyed by the possibility of redemption. "I feel your love and your resolve," Sebastian whispered, his voice now carrying the tender promise of a new beginning. "In your heart, I see the power to transform even the darkest of fates." In that moment, Aurora knew that their love, though born in the depths of despair, had the strength to overcome the barriers of time and fate. The mansion, the garden, and every echo of the past seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief, as if at last accepting that even the most tormented souls could find solace and renewal in love. As dawn approached and the first light of a new day broke over the horizon, the curse that had long bound Sebastian's spirit began to lift. The once haunted corridors of the estate filled with a gentle warmth, promising that love, in its most enduring form, always finds a way to mend broken hearts. In the quaint town of Ashbrook, where love blossomed like the roses in its central park, Valentine's Day was always a grand affair. The streets were adorned with crimson banners, shop windows gleamed with heart-shaped displays, and couples wandered hand in hand, lost in romantic bliss. But this year, something felt different. Amara had never been a fan of Valentine's Day. While others exchanged chocolates and whispered sweet nothings, she found solace in solitude. Love, she believed, was a fleeting illusion, one she had no desire to chase. But when a velvet-wrapped box arrived at her doorstep on the eve of February 14th, she couldn't ignore the strange curiosity that crept over her. There was no return address, no sender's name, only a small, elegant tag attached to the deep red ribbon. To Amara, a heart as rare as yours deserves a gift just as unique. She hesitated before untying the ribbon. Inside the box, nestled in soft black silk, was a heart. A real, pulsing human heart. She dropped the box with a choked gasp. The heart thudded onto the wooden floor, but did not stop beating. The rhythmic, grotesque pulsations echoed through her apartment, filling the silence with a sound she would never forget. She forced herself to move, snatching up the heavy lamp from her desk as a weapon. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she crept toward the door. Peering through the peephole, she expected to see a stranger, perhaps someone playing a cruel prank. But the hallway was empty. A chill slithered down her spine as she slowly unlatched the lock, her heart hammering against her ribs. She opened the door just a fraction, enough to confirm that no one was there. Then she looked down. At her feet lay another box, identical to the first. The same velvet wrapping, the same elegant ribbon, the same creeping dread curling in her stomach. With a shaking hand, she untied the bow. Inside was a single note, written in looping script. 9 more to go. Amara slammed the door shut, locking and bolting it. Panic clawed at her throat. 9 more? 9 more hearts. Was this a threat? A warning? Or was she the next intended victim? She grabbed the first box off the floor and hurled it into the sink, turning the faucet on full blast. Water splashed over the heart, but it continued to beat, the pulse stubborn and relentless. Then the whisper returned. I chose you, Amara. Your heart is the last one I need. The lights flickered, casting the room into a stuttering nightmare of brightness and shadow. She turned in every direction, but there was no sign of him, whoever he was. Yet his presence was suffocating, filling every corner of the space like an unseen predator stalking its prey. Her phone vibrated violently on the table. A message. Unknown number, don't run. The collector always finds what he seeks. Her body went cold. The next few hours were a blur. Amara barricaded herself inside her apartment, refusing to sleep, refusing to blink for too long. She scoured the internet for anything, any mention of a collector who sent beating hearts to his victims. And then she found it, an old urban legend, whispered among those who had lost loved ones under mysterious circumstances. The story spoke of a figure who sought the 10 rarest hearts, those untouched by love, unclaimed by another. Once he collected all 10, he would finally be free. 9 hearts had already been taken. Amara was the 10th. Her breath hitched as she read the last line. Once the final heart beats in his hands, he will return to the living, and the one he chooses will take his place. A scraping noise echoed from the living room. The velvet-wrapped box she had thrown into the sink was no longer there. She turned slowly, her pulse a drumbeat of terror. A single red rose now sat atop her coffee table, its petals dark with something too thick to be water. Behind her, the whisper came one last time. It's time, Amara. Will you give me your heart? The lights went out, and the collector finally claimed his prize. Eleanor never believed in fate. Love, to her, was little more than a pleasant accident, something stumbled upon rather than preordained. She had spent years moving from city to city, never forming attachments, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. But then she found Rose Hill Manor. It was a Victorian house nestled deep in the countryside, its towering spires piercing the overcast sky. The paint was peeling and ivy strangled its brick walls, but there was something alluring about it. The real estate agent had practically begged her not to buy it. "The house is strange," the woman had said hesitantly. "People don't stay there for long." That only intrigued Eleanor more. She had always been drawn to things others avoided, forgotten places, abandoned homes, the eerie beauty of decay. And so, on a whim, she bought Rose Hill Manor. The first few days were uneventful. Dust coated every surface, the floors creaked beneath her every step, and the wind howled through the cracked windows at night. Yet, despite its neglect, the house felt warm, as if it were waiting for her. On the morning of February 14th, Eleanor woke to the scent of roses. It was subtle at first, just a faint sweetness in the air. But as she wandered through the house, the fragrance grew stronger, almost intoxicating. She found the source in the dining room. A letter lay on the table, folded neatly, the paper yellowed with age. Her name was written on the front in looping script. Eleanor. A chill ran down her spine. She had never seen this letter before. She was alone in the house, wasn't she? Slowly she opened it. "My dearest Eleanor, you are home at last. I have waited for you for so long. Tonight, we will finally be together." The signature at the bottom was smeared, unreadable. Her heart pounded. She hadn't told anyone she was moving here. Who could have written this? And how long had it been sitting here, waiting for her? As if it had been waiting a very long time. The rest of the day passed in a fog of unease. The air inside the house felt heavier, the shadows darker. Every time she turned a corner, she swore she saw movement just at the edge of her vision. By sunset, she was exhausted. Maybe it was just her imagination, the stress of moving into an unfamiliar place. But as night fell, the house began to breathe. At first, it was subtle. A creaking floorboard when she wasn't moving. A door swaying open without a breeze. Then, as she lay in bed, she heard something new. A whisper. It came from inside the walls, muffled but persistent. The words were unintelligible at first, a soft murmur rippling through the wooden bones of the house. Then, clear as day, she heard her name. Eleanor. She sat up, heart hammering in her chest. The whisper came again, closer this time. "You are home. You are mine." She bolted from the bed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The air smelled of roses again, stronger now, cloying, suffocating. Then, from the hallway, the floor groaned under the weight of unseen footsteps. Someone was coming. Eleanor grabbed the nearest object, a brass candlestick, and edged toward the bedroom door. She held her breath, listening. The footsteps stopped. Then, softly, almost tenderly, the whisper returned. "Why do you run from me, my love?" She threw open the door. The hallway was empty, yet the scent of roses was overwhelming now, seeping from the walls themselves. The wallpaper had begun to curl and peel, revealing something beneath it. Something dark and pulsing, like veins stretching across rotting wood. She turned to flee, but the hallway had changed. The walls had drawn closer, shifting impossibly, leading her not toward the exit, but deeper into the house. The doors she had passed before were gone. There was only one path now, and it led to the dining room. The table was no longer empty. Sitting in the center was a new letter. She picked it up with trembling hands. "Do not be afraid, Eleanor. You were always meant to be here. I have loved you in every lifetime. And now you are finally mine." Eleanor staggered back, her vision swimming. The walls shuddered as if alive, the wood groaning with something ancient and longing. The whisper came again, but now it wasn't just a voice. A figure stood at the far end of the room. He was tall, his face obscured by shadows, but she could feel his gaze burning into her. He reached out a hand, imploring, desperate. "I have waited for you." Memories that weren't hers flashed through her mind. A life lived in another time. A love promised, then broken. A vow made in blood and desperation. This house, this place, had been waiting for her return, and now it would never let her leave. The walls sealed shut. The house breathed, its whispers turning to a chorus of sighs and moans. Eleanor felt her body grow weak, her will bending under the weight of something far greater than herself. The house loved her, and it would keep her. Forever. Days passed. Weeks. And then, one night, the scent of roses filled Rosehill Manor once more. A velvet-wrapped letter sat upon the dining table, freshly placed. The name on the front, Michael. A new owner had arrived, and the house was waiting for him. The first time Cash and Vance saw the grave, it was Valentine's Day. The world was buried beneath a thick layer of snow, the sky a dull gray, as if winter itself had forgotten warmth ever existed. He had been driving up to Black Hollow, a remote cabin nestled deep in the woods, a place he hadn't visited in over a decade. Heartbreak had a way of making people run. 2 weeks ago, Lena, the woman he had planned to propose to, had left him. No explanation, no warning, just a text message that read, "I'm sorry, Cass. Please don't try to find me." No calls, no answers. It was like she had vanished into thin air. So he fled to the mountains, thinking the silence might quiet the aching questions in his head. But as he pulled up the winding path toward the cabin, his tires skidding on the icy road, he saw it. A single red ribbon fluttering in the wind. It was tied to a small wooden marker, a grave half buried in snow. Cashin stared at the grave, breath fogging in the freezing air. There was no name carved into the wood, only a heart-shaped locket hanging from a rusted nail in the center of the marker. Against his better judgment, he knelt, brushing away the snow. Beneath the locket, faintly scratched into the wood, was a single word. Lena. Cashin's pulse roared in his ears. His hands trembled as he gripped the locket, prying it open. Inside was a photo. Lena smiling. His Lena. The same soft eyes. The same dimple on her left cheek. But something was wrong. The photo was old, the paper brittle, the edges yellowed with time. And on the back, written in faded ink, "My love buried deep." Cashin staggered to his feet, the locket slipping from his fingers into the snow. Someone had put this here. Someone knew Lena. But how? And why was this grave so old? By the time Cashin reached the cabin, his hands were numb, but the chill in his bones had nothing to do with the weather. The inside of the cabin was just as he remembered, dusty wooden floors, a stone fireplace, the faint scent of pine clinging to the air. He locked the door behind him, bolted it for good measure. Then the whisper came, "Cashin." He froze. The voice was soft, almost tender. A voice he knew better than his own. A voice that should not be here. Lena's voice. His breath hitched as he turned. The room was empty. But the whisper came again, closer now, curling against his ear like a secret. "Why did you leave me?" His skin went ice cold. Lena was not here. But someone wanted him to think she was. Cashin grabbed his phone, fumbling to call someone, anyone. But there was no signal, no connection. Just dead silence. That's when he saw the photo album sitting on the cabin's old oak table. It hadn't been there before. Heart pounding, he stepped forward, fingers hesitant as he flipped it open. The pages were filled with photos of him and Lena. Their first date. Their trip to Greece. A candid shot of her laughing, taken just last summer. But the last page made his stomach drop. It was a photograph of him, standing outside, right next to the grave. The snow in the photo was fresh, undisturbed, except for his own footprints. Cashin's breath came in shallow gasps. He had never been here before today. So how the hell was this photo already inside the album? A loud thud shook the roof. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pressing into the creaking wooden planks above him. Someone, or something, was on the roof. Cashin grabbed the fireplace poker, holding it like a weapon as he backed toward the door. His mind screamed at him to leave, to run, to get as far from this place as possible. But then he heard it, a soft, feminine laugh. He knew that laugh. He had kissed the lips it came from. And yet, something was wrong. It was too close, too clear, as if it were being whispered inside his head. He forced himself to look out the window. His stomach turned to ice. There were footprints in the snow, but not just any footprints. They led away from the grave, and they were coming straight toward the cabin. Cashin's grip on the poker tightened. The cabin door loomed in front of him, its old wooden frame rattling slightly as the wind howled outside. Then the knocking began. Slow, rhythmic, 3 deliberate taps. He couldn't move. Then another set of knocks. Harder this time. "Cashin, please let me in." Lena's voice. But Lena was gone. Wasn't she? The door handle twisted. The locks unlatched themselves. His breath caught in his throat as the door creaked open, inch by inch, revealing nothing but swirling snow outside. And then, a handprint bloomed against the glass of the window. A single bloody handprint. And beneath it, written in a shaky, desperate scrawl, "My love buried deep." Cashin never left the cabin. The next morning, when a search party found his abandoned car on the road, they followed his footprints to the grave. The snow had been disturbed. Something had been dug up. Or perhaps, something had crawled out. There was no sign of Cashin, only the grave marker, standing tall despite the wind. A new locket hung from the nail now. When they opened it, there was a fresh photograph inside. Cashin, smiling, and written on the back in a familiar looping script, "My love buried deep." Soren Vale never believed in soulmates. As a child, he had watched his mother sit by the window for hours, waiting for someone who never returned. She would absently stroke the thin, red thread wrapped around her ring finger, a thread that, according to legend, connected her to the love of her life. "The red string of fate," she had whispered to him once, her voice distant, lost in a memory he would never know. "It ties two souls together. No matter how far they go, no matter how much time passes, they will always find each other." But Soren had never seen love bring anything but suffering. His mother's red string had led her to a grave. His father had died before Soren ever had the chance to know him. A tragic accident, they said. A cruel twist of fate. So, when Soren turned 18 and found a red string tied around his own pinky finger, he did what he had sworn he would do. He took a knife and cut it, and for 10 years nothing happened. Until now. Now the string is back, and this time it won't let go. The first time Soren noticed it again, it was the night before Valentine's Day. He had been brushing his teeth, half asleep, when he lifted his hand to rinse his mouth and froze. A thin red thread coiled around his pinky finger. His breath caught in his throat. His mind struggled to make sense of it. It had been years. He had cut it years ago. He had felt the blade slice through it, had watched the severed thread slip to the floor like a dead thing. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and tugged at it. The knot was impossibly tight. It would not budge. A sick sense of déjà vu coiled in his stomach. He turned his hand over, following the thread's path as it stretched across the room, past the sink, out the bathroom door, and into the darkness beyond. It disappeared into the hallway. Somewhere on the other end of that thread, someone was waiting for him. A chill slid down his spine. "No!" His voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. He grabbed the scissors from the counter and, with a trembling hand, brought them to the thread. Snip! The blades met resistance. The string did not break. Soren's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He squeezed the scissors harder, tried again. Snip! 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 Nothing. The thread would not sever. He dropped the scissors, breath shuddering, and turned back toward the mirror. And that was when he saw it. In the reflection, standing just behind him, was a figure. A woman. She was shrouded in darkness, her form almost too blurred to make out. But the red thread wrapped around her own finger, connecting them, was as sharp as blood against the glass. She lifted her hand and pulled. Soren awoke to the sound of his phone buzzing. For a moment he lay there, caught between the weight of sleep and the lingering echoes of the nightmare that had chased him through the night. Then he saw the red string. It was still there, wrapped around his pinky finger, stretching out of the bedroom and into the unseen dark beyond. His stomach lurched. The phone buzzed again. He grabbed it, blinking against the harsh glow of the screen. One new message. It was from an unknown number. The message was simple. "Did you forget about me?" Soren's hands tightened around the phone. His throat felt dry, his body too stiff. His mind struggled for a rational explanation. This was a joke. It had to be. He forced himself to type back. "Who is this?" A response came almost immediately. "Follow the string." His breath hitched. Slowly, he turned his head. The red thread stretched from his hand and underneath the closet door. The door was open just a crack, and in that sliver of darkness, something shifted. He was not a coward. At least, That was what he told himself as he stood at the edge of his bed, staring at the red thread leading into the closet. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to leave this place, to flee and never look back. But he couldn't, because deep inside him, beneath the fear, was something worse. A memory of someone he had loved, and someone he had forgotten. His trembling fingers reached for the closet door. And then, the string pulled. Hard. Soren's body jerked forward, as if an invisible force had yanked him toward the dark. His feet scrambled against the floor, but the pull was too strong. The door slammed shut behind him, and inside the suffocating darkness of the closet, he was no longer alone. Something was there, breathing, waiting, and then a voice, soft and loving, whispered against his ear. "You shouldn't have cut the string, Soren." His scream never left his throat. The next morning, his neighbors reported hearing screams. But when they knocked on Soren's door, there was no answer. The house was silent. The police arrived later that afternoon, breaking down the door. They found no sign of struggle, no sign of forced entry. The only thing they found was a single red string, tied tightly around the bedpost, and a Valentine's Day card resting on the pillow. Inside, in familiar handwriting, were 4 words. "I found you again." Soren Vale was never seen again. But somewhere, deep in the unknown, the red string still stretches, waiting to pull someone else in. Valentine's Day was never a day of celebration in Gideon Harlow's family. In their small, forgotten town, February 14th was known as Widow's Night. A night when the wind howled through the streets like a mourning woman, when fresh roses left on doorsteps rotted before sunrise. As a child, Gideon didn't understand why his mother locked the doors and shut the curtains tight. He didn't understand why, on this night, people left town, avoiding the old house at the end of the lane. But now, at 29, he understood. Because he had inherited the widow's house. And the moment he stepped inside, the house began to weep. The house had stood in Blackvale for over 200 years. It was known as the widow's house because no man who lived inside ever survived past Valentine's Day. They called it a curse, one that began when a woman named Margaret Holloway was left waiting for a love that never returned. The legend went like this. On the eve of Valentine's Day, Margaret's fiancé promised her forever. But he never came. They found her the next morning, in her wedding dress, standing in the cold with a letter clutched in her hands. She had waited all night, and by the time they found her, she was no longer alive. Since then, any man who dared live in her house was claimed by her grief. Every February 14th, she chose another one. Gideon never believed in the stories. He had always been a skeptic, a man of reason. But that was before the Valentine arrived. It was February 13th, the night before Valentine's Day, when Gideon found the envelope. It sat on the old wooden desk in the study, covered in dust, as if it had been waiting there for years. His name was written on the front. The ink was fresh. His hands trembled as he lifted the letter. Slowly, he peeled open the envelope, pulling out a single sheet of parchment. The words inside made his blood run cold. "My love, I have waited so long for you. Tomorrow you will be mine. Do not run. Do not hide. Love always finds its way home." There was no signature, just a faint stain of something dark at the bottom of the page. It smelled like roses and decay. That night, the house came alive. Gideon lay awake in bed, every shadow in the room stretching long and thin in the dim glow of the street lamp outside. Then, at exactly midnight, he heard it, a soft, distant weeping. It came from the mirror across the room. His stomach knotted as he sat up, heart pounding. The weeping grew louder, echoing through the silence. Slowly, he turned his head toward the mirror. His breath hitched. There was someone inside it. A woman dressed in a tattered white gown, her face obscured by a black lace veil. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. And then, she stopped crying. Slowly, she lifted her head. Gideon's body locked in place as the woman reached out. A cold, skeletal hand pressed against the glass from the inside. And then, the mirror cracked, a single, jagged line splitting straight down the middle. The weeping stopped. and in the silence, a whisper slithered through the air. "Tomorrow we will dance." Gideon did not sleep that night. February 14th arrived with a storm. The wind howled through the house, rattling the windows, shaking the floorboards beneath his feet. At exactly midnight, the air turned heavy. Gideon stood in the grand parlor, his breath visible in the unnatural cold. The fireplace roared, casting long shadows against the walls. And then, the music began, a soft, haunting waltz played by an invisible orchestra. His pulse thundered as he turned toward the doorway. And there she stood, the widow of Black Veil. She was dressed in her decayed wedding gown, her face still hidden beneath the black veil. The air around her seemed to ripple, distorting reality. She held out her hand. "Dance with me, my love." Gideon stepped back, her head tilted. She took a step forward. "You promised me forever." His throat closed. "I never promised you anything." The widow laughed, a hollow, broken sound. She lifted her veil, and Gideon saw what remained of her face. They found Gideon the next morning. The house was silent. The storm had passed. The fire had long since burned out. His body lay in the center of the ballroom, his eyes wide open, frozen in horror. His hand was still outstretched, as if he had been dancing with someone who wasn't there. But the most disturbing part was his face. He was smiling, and in his hand, clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white, was a single black lace veil. The curse had claimed another soul. And somewhere, in the echo of forgotten music, the widow of Black Veil waited for her next Valentine. Lena never wanted to go to the Valentine's Day party, but her best friend Zoe had insisted. "Come on," Zoe had said, grinning as she curled her hair in the mirror. "It's a tradition. If you spend Valentine's alone, you're cursed to be single all year." Lena wasn't superstitious. She didn't believe in curses. But she also didn't want to spend another night alone, scrolling through dating apps filled with men who only wanted one thing. So she went, and that was the worst mistake of her life. Because by the end of the night, she was running for her life. The party was held at an abandoned mansion on the edge of town, a crumbling estate with peeling wallpaper and chandeliers that hung like skeletal hands from the ceiling. People called it the Loveless House. Legend said that decades ago, a man had thrown a Valentine's ball for his fiancée, and by the end of the night, everyone inside was dead. "It's just a story," Zoe had said, rolling her eyes. Besides, that was forever ago. But when Lena stepped inside, a coldness settled in her bones. Something about this place felt wrong. Then she saw him, a tall figure, standing in the farthest corner of the room. He wore a black suit and a smooth, white mask, featureless except for a thin, blood-red smile. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. And when Lena locked eyes with him, her stomach twisted into a cold, tight knot. Because somehow, she knew he was looking only at her. Hours passed. The party grew wilder. Couples drifted into the dark corners of the house. The music throbbed against the walls like a beating heart. Zoe had disappeared upstairs with some guy. And Lena, she was dancing, not because she wanted to, because she had no choice. Somehow, she had ended up on the dance floor, in his arms. The man in the mask. His grip was firm, too strong, his gloved fingers pressing into the small of her back as he led her through the waltz. "You don't belong here," he murmured, his voice low, almost affectionate. Lena's pulse spiked. I was just leaving." His head tilted. The mask caught the candlelight, its hollow smile stretching wider. "No, you weren't." Her breath hitched. And then she saw it, a red envelope peeking from his pocket. The same kind of envelope that had been left on every victim's doorstep. The Valentine killer's mark. Lena's heart slammed against her ribs. The legend was real. And now, she was next. Lena shoved him away and bolted. The music faded. The party vanished. All she heard was her own breath, her own footsteps pounding against the wooden floor as she ran through the house. Behind her, slow, steady footsteps followed. "Run, run, little Valentine." Her hands trembled as she threw open a door, only to find another hallway stretching endlessly before her. Her pulse pounded. She didn't recognize this part of the house. Had the layout changed? No. That was impossible. It had to be the adrenaline, the fear messing with her head. Still, she ran. The air grew colder. The candles flickered. And then, the walls began to bleed. Thick, black blood seeped from the walls, dripping onto the floor in slow, syrupy streams. The scent of iron curled in Lena's nose, thick and nauseating. She stumbled, her breath ragged. And then she saw them. The bodies. Dozens of Valentine's Day dresses, now rotting, their wearers long dead. They lined the hallway, their hands still clutching old love letters, their faces frozen in silent screams. A deep voice whispered through the air. They all danced with me too once. A hand closed around her wrist. Cold, strong, unbreakable. She barely had time to scream before the killer dragged her backward into the darkness. Lena fought. She kicked, clawed, and thrashed, but he was too strong. He slammed her against the ballroom mirror, his mask inches from her face. "No one leaves Loveless House, my dear," he whispered. "Not without giving me their heart." Lena's breath shuddered. And then, she saw his reflection. Not just his, but all the others before him. A long line of masked figures, stretching endlessly into the past, their eyes hollow, their hands covered in blood. The house didn't just kill people. It kept them. And tonight, it had chosen her. The next morning, the police arrived. They found dozens of bodies. But not Lena. She was gone. No one ever saw her again. But sometimes, on Valentine's night, if you listen closely, you can still hear the music playing inside Loveless House. And if you're unlucky enough to be invited to a party there, be careful who you dance with, because the next Valentine might be you. Late on a chilly February evening, Marisol found herself alone in her small apartment when a peculiar envelope arrived. It wasn't delivered by any courier. Instead, it lay on her doorstep as if it had been waiting there for ages. The envelope was a deep, velvety red with intricate gold filigree that caught the light in the fading dusk. In bold, elegant script on the front, it read simply, "For Marisol, your Valentine awaits." Marisol's heart fluttered as she hesitated. She had never been one to attend grand social gatherings or extravagant parties, especially not on Valentine's Day. Yet something about this invitation stirred a mix of curiosity and longing in her soul, an inexplicable pull she couldn't ignore. The envelope smelled faintly of roses and old parchment, evoking memories of forgotten love letters. With trembling fingers, she opened it to reveal a single, handwritten note. "Tonight, at the stroke of midnight, join us at Blackwood Estate. Wear your mask, for not all faces are meant to be seen. The night will sing with secrets, and only the brave shall hear its crimson whispers." The note ended with no signature, only an emblem resembling intertwined hearts and thorns. Marisol's pulse quickened. Was this a clever prank? A macabre invitation to an exclusive masquerade? Or was it something far more sinister? Despite her apprehension, an inner voice insisted that fate had chosen her for this night. And so, with a mixture of dread and anticipation, she prepared to step into the unknown. Marisol's journey to Blackwood Estate was as eerie as the invitation itself. The narrow country road wound through a forest where tall, ancient trees loomed like silent sentinels. The only light came from the moon, a ghostly orb casting long shadows across the frost-covered ground. As she drove, the wind whispered secrets, and the crunch of gravel under her tires echoed like distant memories. Every turn of the road deepened her sense of foreboding. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches intertwining overhead until they formed a dark cathedral. In the rearview mirror, she caught fleeting glimpses of movement, a shadow here, a flash of red there, but every time she looked directly, nothing was there. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the imposing silhouette of Blackwood Estate emerged from the gloom. The mansion's stone facade was cloaked in ivy, its many windows dark and empty. A single light burned in one upper window, beckoning her forward. At the estate's massive iron gates, Marisol paused. The gate creaked open as if welcoming her, and she stepped into a courtyard bathed in moonlight. Soft strains of a waltz drifted from the mansion's open doors, accompanied by the faint scent of roses and damp earth. Guests in ornate masks moved slowly, their expressions unreadable behind layers of intricate disguises. Marisol's own mask, a simple black half-face adorned with subtle crimson accents, hid her eyes, but couldn't hide the tremor in her heart. Inside, the grand ballroom was filled with figures dancing in slow, hypnotic circles. Crystal chandeliers refracted flickering candlelight onto the polished floor, and every surface seemed to hum with an undercurrent of sorrow and desire. Marisol felt as though she were walking into a dream or a nightmare. Every face she passed was a mystery, every whispered conversation a secret promise. Yet amid the swirling dancers, one figure stood apart. He was tall and graceful, his presence both magnetic and ominous. His mask was pure white, contrasting starkly with the deep red of his cravat. Without a word, he extended his hand towards her. Something in his gaze, even hidden behind the mask, stirred a forgotten longing in her heart. Unable to resist, she took his hand, and together they began to dance. As they moved in perfect unison, the music seemed to wrap around them, pulling them into a private world of crimson whispers. His hand at her waist was cold, sending shivers through her body. Every step they took felt predestined, as if the night itself had scripted their meeting. But even as the dance entranced her, a nagging fear whispered in the back of her mind. Who was this man, and what did he truly want? Midnight approached. The waltz slowed, and the chatter in the ballroom hushed to a reverent murmur. Marisol's mysterious partner guided her to a secluded corner of the mansion, a corridor lined with faded portraits whose eyes seemed to follow their every move. Here, the ambient lighting was dimmer, the air cooler, heavy with secrets. He stopped before an ancient mirror, its surface clouded with time. Slowly, he removed his mask, revealing a face that was both handsome and haunting. His eyes were a deep, unsettling shade of red, and his skin bore an almost ethereal pallor. Marisol's breath caught as she recognized something in his gaze, a deep melancholy and an eternal sorrow that resonated with her own hidden pain. In a voice that trembled with both longing and despair, he spoke. I have searched for you across endless nights, through dreams and despair. You are the one who can break this endless curse, a curse that binds my soul to these walls. He revealed a small, ornate locket from beneath his vest. Opening it, Marisol saw a faded photograph of a woman whose eyes mirrored her own. The inscription read, "Forever in crimson whispers." As he continued, the revelation unfolded like a tragic ballad. He was not merely a guest at the masquerade. He was the guardian of a legacy, cursed to eternally seek a love that could liberate him from the confines of the estate. His every dance, every whispered word, was a desperate plea for redemption, a chance to escape the loneliness that had plagued him for centuries. Marisol felt her heart tremble with a mixture of terror and compassion. In that moment, she realized that her presence was no accident. The invitation, the mask, the mysterious corridors, they were all part of an intricate design, drawing her inexorably into a fate she had never imagined. As the clock neared the final hour, the atmosphere within Blackwood Estate grew increasingly charged. The other guests seemed to vanish into the background, their laughter fading into echoes, as if the very walls of the mansion were absorbing their souls. Marisol and her enigmatic partner were left alone amid the swirling shadows and flickering candlelight. A sudden gust of wind swept through the corridor, and the mansion's ancient architecture began to shift. Doors that once led to opulent ballrooms now opened onto bleak, desolate corridors. The soft strains of the waltz became distorted, warped into a chilling dirge. Marisol clutched the locket tightly as visions of past lovers, lost, grieving, and trapped, flashed before her eyes. In a crescendo of whispered voices, the mansion seemed to come alive. Crimson petals drifted from the ceiling, swirling around them like fallen memories. The spectral forms of those once claimed by the curse materialized along the walls, their eyes filled with unspoken sorrow and longing. They murmured in a language that transcended time, a language of regret, passion, and eternal yearning. Her partner's voice broke through the cacophony. Only your love can break the cycle. Give me your heart, and together we shall be free. Torn between the terror of the unknown and a strange, compelling desire to save him, Marisol hesitated. Every instinct screamed to flee, to run from the supernatural horror unfolding around her. Yet the locket in his hand, the promise in his eyes, and the haunting melody of the night wove a spell she couldn't resist. In that fateful moment, Marisol made her choice. With trembling determination, she reached out and took his hand. The room fell into an eerie silence as the red string of fate, an invisible thread that had bound their destinies, seemed to ignite with life. The spectral guests circled around them, their voices merging into one collective sigh. He led her to a hidden chamber deep within the mansion, a sanctum shrouded in candlelight and the scent of wilted roses. There, carved into the stone wall, was an inscription in ancient script that read, "In love, we find our redemption. In passion, we shatter our chains." Her partner guided her to a central pedestal where a single, ruby-studded heart rested. It pulsed slowly, as if in sync with their own heartbeats. With a voice heavy with both sorrow and hope, he whispered, "This heart, once mine, now beats for both of us. Release your fear, and together we shall break this curse." Marisol's eyes shimmered with tears. In that moment, she understood that the mansion, and all its tragic history, was a prison for lost souls, a labyrinth of sorrow that could only be freed by a love willing to sacrifice everything. Summoning every ounce of courage, she pressed her hand against the ruby heart. A surge of warmth spread through her, and a brilliant light filled the chamber. For what felt like an eternity, time itself seemed to shatter. Memories of past loves, lost opportunities, and deep regrets collided with visions of a future unbound by pain. The red string that had haunted her, that had drawn her to this cursed estate, glowed with an intensity that eclipsed the darkness. When the light finally faded, Marisol and her enigmatic partner stood together, transformed. The spectral guests, freed from their eternal torment, began to fade into gentle whispers, their cries of sorrow replaced by murmurs of gratitude. The curse of Blackwood Estate was broken, but at a cost. At dawn, the first rays of light crept over the horizon, bathing Blackwood Estate in a soft, golden glow. The mansion, once a fortress of despair, now stood as a monument to redemption and rebirth. Marisol stepped outside, the cool morning air filled with the scent of fresh roses and promise. Beside her, the mysterious man, no longer a prisoner of a cursed past, smiled gently. Though his features had softened, the memory of his red eyes and haunted expression remained etched in her mind. He offered her his hand once more. "Let us begin anew," he said softly, his voice carrying the promise of healing and hope. Marisol took his hand, and together they walked away from the estate. Behind them, the red envelope, the masquerade, and the echo of crimson whispers faded into legend. Yet every Valentine's Day, those who passed by Blackwood Estate swore they could hear the faint strains of a waltz and the soft murmur of love that once broke a curse. For Marisol, the journey had been one of terror and transformation, a night that taught her that even in the darkest of places, love could bloom and set the heart free.